Joining us now is Human Rights Watch Deputy Asia Director Phil Robertson. He's based in Bangkok, Thailand, but he joins us now in our Manila studios. Phil, great to have you with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. It seems like that the ICC is defiant. They're not backing down into the drug war investigation, into the killings, into the Philippines. But the Philippines is defiant. They won't get any help. Why not just give it all up?
Well, I mean, there's been plenty of places in the world where the International Criminal Court has investigated without the cooperation of the local government. They have the capacity to do that. The idea that somehow the Philippines is going to take their ball and go home is going to stop this process is simply not a fact. The legal argument that the Philippines is bound by the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court for acts that took place when it was a member of the court is established international practice. So all this talk about, refusing to acknowledge the court and somehow saying that this is interference in sovereignty, there's no legal case there. And the reality is that the government of the Philippines keeps repeating this, I think, to try to persuade the Filipino people of something that is simply not established in international law.
But my question is, what is the capacity right now of the ICC to investigate? They can come into the country, the government said, and there's even a possibility if they enter the country and start investigating that potentially that they could be arrested. So why still pursue it in the first place?
Well,
what's the capacity for them to investigate?
They have a significant capacity. I mean, we've seen, for instance, investigations taking place in various countries in Africa where they didn't have access, in Syria. They've just indicted or issued an arrest warrant for Vladimir Putin of Russia. So, I mean, this is quite clear that
But it is all from a distance, Phil. They have to be on the ground to be able to get all the evidence.
It's very possible to get evidence in many different ways. And what we have seen continuously, not just from the International Criminal Court, but also from the UN Human Rights Council and its mechanisms, there's capacity to investigate. So look at Myanmar. There's been investigations in Myanmar, but the UN investigators are not allowed in there. North Korea. There was a very comprehensive report about what happened in North Korea and the crimes against humanity that the Kim family have perpetrated.
So bring these witnesses to the International Criminal Court, or maybe via Zoom. There are many ways of doing the investigations right now.
Absolutely. Well, they're going to do this. I mean, the reality is that the investigation is going forward until such time as the appeal of the Philippines to stop the resumption of the investigation is heard and decided. But it is going forward. What has happened today is that the action of the Philippines to appeal a temporary suspension, to try to suspend the investigation while the appeal was being heard, was denied. And it was denied because they frankly didn't provide any evidence.
But the bottom line is, Phil, why not just leave it to the police and the local Justice Department to handle all of these cases? Why does the ICC still have to dip their hands into it?
Well, let's take a look at what has happened here. I mean, how many cases have we had out of the thousands of cases where there's actually been convictions? Two.
Out of the thousands.
Thousands. And the other fact is that, despite what the Secretary of Justice keeps saying, that there's a highly functional judicial system here, I think if you asked any Filipino, they would say that's not the case. The reality is that there's been years of delay. There's no serious investigations taking place in many of these cases. Evidence has been lost. There doesn't seem to be any political will within the Philippines government to seriously investigate
But
this.
should we not just leave it now to the Marcos administration, as you say, the political will to investigate these cases?
Well, they could investigate. They could continue investigating. There's nothing that the ICC has done.
And bring the guilty behind bars.
Well, if they're willing to prosecute, let's see if they do it. But, they've had plenty of chances. There's nothing that was decided today that prevents the Philippines from continuing its own investigations. But so far, we've seen those investigations are going nowhere simply because there doesn't seem to be any serious political will to do so.
So, if the International Criminal Court has decided not to back down on its investigation into the drug war killings in the Philippines, how long do you think, Phil, will be the process? And when will they come out with a decision?
Well, I mean, the International Criminal Court does not move quickly. That is very clear.
Could it take, what, 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, or even longer than
It could
that?
take several years for sure, but we don't know. The reality is that we don't have insight into what is actually happening in the prosecution, nor should we have. This is something that the prosecutors are pursuing a professional investigation. They're going to have these investigators looking at this. They're going to be talking to witnesses. They're going to be collecting evidence, and they will follow the facts.
And until now, families of many drug war victims are still seeking justice in long, drawn-out cases. You are here in the Philippines, together with the Asia Director of Human Rights Watch.
Yes.
Are you speaking to any of these families?
We have been speaking to families. We have been speaking to the government. We've been speaking to the Commission on Human Rights. We're trying to speak to the Secretary of Justice and the Secretary of Foreign Affairs.
And have they given you
they're not really returning they're not really returning our calls. So I mean, we would like to talk to the government about these very serious issues. I mean, we would like to have them investigated. We want accountability for these abuses that have taken place. But, again, it doesn't look like we're seeing the kind of political will that's required to get to the bottom line, which is real accountability and ending the impunity to people that were wrongfully killed by the police and others.
So why don't you think there's accountability or transparency and support for this ICC probe in the Marcos administration?
Well, I think there's a political dimension here, and we can.
What is a political dimension,
Well,
Phil?
I mean, we know who the vice president is, and we know who the former president is. There is obviously a very strong resistance from Rodrigo Duterte to be held accountable for what he ordered and what he was encouraging. But I think ultimately he will be held accountable.
And what do you think is the next move? Because even the president said today he doesn't know what is the next move.
Well, what we're going to see is a decision by the appeals court sometime in the coming months about the initial appeal of the government of the Philippines to, again, suspend the investigation, to basically say the investigation should not resume, to oppose what the prosecutor was granted in January, to restart his investigation. And once that decision is made, then we'll see what happens next.
We'll see how this drama unfolds between
Yes.
the Philippine government and the International Criminal Court. Thank you so much for joining us here in our Manila studios. Phil Robertson, Deputy Asia Director of Human Rights Watch.